First of all, we have Michael Gould. So Michael is a conservation biology student at the University of Wollongong. He's completing his honours degree and he has a passion for nature, plants, particularly orchids and bushcare. We have Josh, who is a Year 11 student at Kiama High School, passionate about bushcare, and he helps his father with bushcare at the moment and conservation. So, welcome Josh. Alita Domet. Alita is a Year 7 student at Kiama High School. She's passionate about flora and fauna and is keen to explore being a wildlife vet in her career. She's attended a number of climate rallies and written regularly to politicians about the issues of climate. Amber is a Year 7 student at Kiama High School. She aspires to be an environmental activist when she completes all her studies. She's particularly concerned about the future of the planet and she wants to try and make a difference in that. Phoebe is a Year 6 student at Kiama Public School and she's passionate about the natural world and has a love of art and she likes to try and combine the two together. She also has a passion for fungi. And Tessa is a Year 6 student from Jamberoo Public School. She's actually passionate about learning more about medicine and how some of our native plants can be used to heal. So please welcome all of these friends.
Good morning everyone. My name is Sweeney and I'm a Year 7 student from Kiama High School. I was interested in coming here today because of my passion for the environment and how I think it's important that we should all be concerned for the future of the planet, no matter the age. I want to be an environmental activist when I grow older, and all I think is that we depend on the planet. So what's the point in growing up to be a dancer or athlete when all we should be paying attention to is the health of the planet? Because not many people realise it, but our health depends on the planet's health, and currently we're not in a very good position for the future. Australian native plants is a very wide topic and also a very important topic. Native plants create biodiversity in the ecosystem and give a source of food and shelter to the animals that may otherwise become endangered. Cultural burning is a very sustainable way of managing the landscape and also revives ancient practices. Cultural burning is a cultural practice created by fire to improve health and growth of the land and its people. Traditionally used by First Nations people, cultural burning has been shown over time to have a really significant impact on the health of plants and animals in affected areas. The heat from a small, cool fire spreads slowly across the bushland in a small parameter of terrain. It is guided and kept in control as it spreads around lightly. The invasive species are died down and struggle to survive through the fire, whereas the seeds from the native species thrive off the cool heat, causing them to crack in half and begin their journey to grow. This forms the regrowth of herbs, grasses, native plants, bush tucker, medicine plants, and encourages consistent sprouting of natives. Cultural burning is a beneficial and less harmful way of hazard reduction burning, which damages invasive plants as well as natives. This type of burning makes it too hot, which bakes the seeds and nutrition in the dirt. This is why cultural burning is needed to be done a specific way, because if it's too hot, it will kill natives. But not only that, it will also bring up plants that are used to the hot fire, which will keep coming back and taking over the natives if you continue to give it the hot fire that it wants. Bracken is an example of this. Bracken is a native fern which takes over, choking out areas where it's not supposed to be, acting as an invasive native. But with cultural burning, the cool fire thins out the bracken and gives room to allow the natives to come through. Cultural burning has a lot of benefits. It helps to prevent bushfires destroying habitat because there's no leaves to act as a fuel for the fire to burn. The native plants that come up from cultural burning also attract wildlife as a source of food and habitat for many different animals. I believe if cultural burning became a regular routine in areas that need it, we would be able to see a big impact in the growth of native species and in the health of the soil and land. I claim as a kid, the future frightens me, and I believe it does for many other students and kids in my generation. Native plants can be a very important contributor in maintaining the environment's health, and as I explained earlier, our health. Cultural burning could really make a positive impact in the future, and I feel is why we should practice it. Thank you for listening.
Wow, thank you, Amber. What a great start to our panel. I thought what we might do is just go through and hear from all of the students, and then we can get a feel for the landscape that they planned, and then we'll open it up for some discussion. But wow, thank you for setting us off.
It's a pleasure.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Gould. I'm 22 years old, and as I said, I'm a student of conservation biology at the University of Wollongong. And yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here on Illawarra today. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak, so thank you. Yeah, I've been interested in biology and the environment for about as long as I can remember, and that led me to my studies at the uni. And through that, I've really gained a huge appreciation and passion for native plants and native ecosystems as well. And yeah, as was mentioned, my particular interests are orchids, but also urban greening and urban ecology and fungi as well. I think there's some really fascinating sort of aspects to all of those things that have been underlooked over the past decades. In my spare time, I am a climate activist. Climate change is obviously one of the greatest concerns that we have as a civilization, and as a young person, it really weighs heavily on me a lot of the time. It's my future, it's the future of everyone else on the path here with me. So I think being engaged in climate activism and fighting against fossil fuel projects and things is incredibly important to me. I'm also involved with Bushcare near my home in North Wollongong, and with Intrepid Landcare, Illawarra, both of which are incredibly fulfilling to me. I'd like to echo what Costa said in that it's a really, really important way to not only build community, but also invest in the future of our environments. And I think it would be wonderful if we had more resources and more opportunities for people to be involved in bushcare and in natural areas restoration, and if we were able to teach it more in schools as well. As for what I'd like to see in the future, given that today's the future of plants, there's sort of three things that I'd really like to see happen in my lifetime. The first is moving away from sort of extractive industries, especially fossil fuels, obviously, but I'd really like to see a move away from seeing the earth as kind of an infinite supply of resources and towards being able to use those resources continually, more harmoniously with nature rather than just taking from it. And that also includes, reducing the amount of native forests that we clear. I think that's one of the biggest problems facing native plants in Australia today is the rate of deforestation for agriculture. Secondly, I'd also like to echo that I think it would be really amazing to see a lot more cultural burning, as well as land back to Indigenous people. I think giving them the sovereignty and the agency to care for country in the way that they have done for countless thousands of years would have a huge impact in Australia, and I think it's something that I'm really glad to see is happening more and more. And then lastly, I think, landcare, seeing more community engagement in landcare and natural areas restoration would be really positive, not only for the environment, but for people, for their mental health, for community health, and for society as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I think we're starting to see some nice threads coming out in the discussion, and these discussions were incubated separately. So I'm really pleased to see the common thread that you're sharing with Amber.
You are standing outside the school gates for the first time in your life. You are supposed to start kindergarten today, but all you feel like doing is going home to play. Suddenly, a big Year 6 student starts explaining how fun school is. Most words fly over your head, but to a clip. School, forest. The next day, you joyfully skip into school, knowing that at lunch you will have the best time putting faces and enjoying nature with your friends. Jamberoo Public School is famous for its magical school forest, where students of all ages eagerly wait the time where they can be themselves in Mother Nature. These children construct bases, play houses, and have even concocted a trading system. This imaginative and creative playtime in my school forest is what sparked an interest in native species and how they might be used to treat the sick all those years ago. In the past, Aboriginal people have used native flora for medicinal treatment. The land gave all that was needed to care for the sick and injured. Some plants were seasonal, like fruits and seeds, but others, like roots, could be found all year long. Different parts of plants were used for individual ailments. This can be seen with the drooping she oak, native to Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania. The Victorian mops used the cones from the trees ground up and applied to sores to treat rheumatism. The bark and wood was also used as a more generalised treatment. Today, native flora is still used in medicines, applying knowledge of plants as remedies based on traditional Aboriginal methods. Some are recent discoveries. Eucalyptus is an example of a medicine that was derived from Aboriginal ideas adjusted to fit the needs of today. Eucalyptus oil is common in Australia and holds many medicinal applications. It is often used to alleviate cold and flu-like symptoms, such as nasal congestion, and is used as a handy-tip repellent. It can also be applied on sores and boils to relieve pain and treats diarrhea and arthritis. But it is not just physical health that nature assists with aiding. Mental health is a significant aspect of our lives and a growing problem in our busy modern society. Now, more than ever, it is important to maintain good mental health. Studies have shown that even something as simple as going for a walk through nature makes an impact. Flora improves concentration, lowers stress levels, and helps to increase your mood. Yet deforestation is at a record high in Australia. Saving our grand old trees whilst continuing to research in an environmentally friendly way means best physical and mental health outcomes for future and present generations. Moving forward, we need to maintain this trend of learning from the past and the present. Knowledge is one of the most valuable gifts to give and is vital to keep progressing. I would like to see more funding and facilities for research about native plants and their medicinal uses. There is so much that humans do not know and can find out if only the resources were in place. Implementing this means a better future for us all.
Tessa, that was fantastic. I love your little talk cards too. Mine are a bit analog. Yours are nice little digital ones that kind of just slip through there beautifully. Wow. You know, just think about what you just heard there in terms of the big picture issue of forest clearing, the unknown number of medicinal plants and properties that require the research of a generation that are ready to do that research with a motivation around medicine and an understanding of the connection between the cultural past and the present and where to go forward in the future. Wow. Thank you. Like both of you, the three of you so far have really set a cracking agenda.
Invasive flora species. Are they something that you think or know a lot about? Good morning. My name is Alita Demet and I'm in Year 7 at Kiama High School. Today, I will start off with defining a non-native invasive flora species. Then, I will give you some examples, tell you how this problem started, and end with some things that we can all do. Invasive non-native plants are a huge problem and they influence so many things. They directly threaten native flora, fauna and habitats. And when pesticides are used to control them, these poisons can have serious impacts on native animals and our health. First of all, what is an invasive native flora species? The definition is a plant that spreads to an area that is beyond where it usually grows and puts native species and agricultural resources at risk. What are some examples of problematic non-native invasive plants? Some that many of you have probably heard of are blackberries, lantana, and mimosa. There are also invasive grass species. I'm sure lots of you love to have a morning coffee, but did you know that the plant that supplies your favourite drink, Arabica coffee plant, is also an invasive species in Australia? Non-native invasive plants influence native flora and fauna in many ways. Firstly, Did you know that there are more introduced plants in Australia than native plants? We have so many incredible native flora species found nowhere else in the world, and people still choose to plant non-natives in their gardens, which sometimes become invasive. Some have been introduced deliberately and others accidentally. For example, many people plant non-native species in their gardens, not paying attention to the destruction they cause to the ecosystem. Those ornamental flowers that people plant quickly escape their gardens, growing in uncontrolled masses. They then start to kill off the native plants around them. A lot of invasive non-native plants are pretty hardy and adapt to the unique conditions of Australia extremely quickly. They also spread super fast as they have few or no native predators to control them. This is why we humans have to do more to tackle them. Most people believe that they're just one person, so their actions won't change anything. This is not true. There are in fact many things that we can all do. Here are a few. Firstly, pull out any weeds you see in your garden. Remember, if you're not sure if it is a weed or not, don't pull it out. It could be a beautiful native plant starting to develop. Secondly, grow native species in your garden instead of introduced plants. Finally, throw plant scraps in your green bin or compost. Many non-native species start to take over areas as people just chuck their plant scraps over their fence instead of placing them in their green bin or compost. Thank you for listening to me this morning. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Wow, thanks, Alita. Touching on the role that invasive species play, it's a big thing. It's a really big thing moving forward, and I think that whole escapades from gardens, it's something that we touch on a lot in Gardening Australia. And one thing that's actually happening this month is there's a launch of a program called Garden Responsibly, where labels will now get a Garden Responsibly rating on it, so that and slowly they're going to go through all the nursery species so that people know whether that could become an invasive plant. And these are ways of dealing with this challenge that you brought up. So the reality around the next decade, the Invasive Species Council is talking about making this decade, the 2020s, the decade of biosecurity. And that biosecurity comes down to our backyard. So really, really well done. Thank you. Oh, which side are we going? We're going here. So Phoebe, you can take it away. Phoebe, welcome.
Good morning. Yes. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. I pay my respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here today. My name is Phoebe Cartwright and I'm a Year 6 student who attends Kiama Public School. I will be talking about the importance of biodiversity in your backyard, your community and country. Well, I have been lucky enough to grow up in Kiama, an area of amazing natural beauty. My childhood has been marked by seasons of drought, catastrophic bushfires, and weather events that have been made worse by climate change. While it is hard not to become overwhelmed at the state of the environment we are set to inherit, I encourage all of us to start right where we are, in our own backyards, to provide areas of biodiverse habitat in our own spaces. It is time for each of us to champion sharing space instead of just developing space. Biodiversity is the variety of all living things that exist within the environment. Each part is equally as important as each other. When one part of that ecosystem is unbalanced, it has a negative effect on everything within the environment. If we acknowledge that we are responsible for contributing to biodiversity, we can make amazing change in the areas in which we live. Why is biodiversity so important? because biodiverse environments provide clean air, water, and supply living things with habitat and food. Biodiversity through native planting helps to maintain healthy soil and regulate our climate. The development of native ecosystems provides shade and help to manage local temperature extremes. So many of our ecosystems have become fragmented due to development, leaving many species of plants and animals vulnerable in our local communities. So how can people my age protect and encourage biodiversity and habitat growth in our local area? Start by finding out about the native species that used to grow in your local area and make them a priority in your gardens. In the Illawarra alone, there are more than 850 indigenous plant species that we can plant in our own spaces. By choosing from the plants that used to exist on the land we call home, we start to recreate connections that originally existed between plants and local native wildlife. Try to plant a few species in each layer in your garden so local wildlife can feed, shelter, or breed. By recreating the different layers in your backyard, you will encourage local wildlife to visit your garden. An example of plantings that are like bushland could include large acacias, banksias, bush peas, along with ferns, salt bushes, and native grasses. Native flowering plants will attract pollinators while also providing food for bird life. Encouraging pollinators will be beneficial if you grow your own fruit or vegetables. Installing fallen logs, rocks, and leaf litter is a great way to increase biodiversity in your own garden. Doing so will provide shelter for insects, which will then attract mammals and small birds. Providing areas of shelter and breeding sites will make birds feel more secure to live in your area, while installing nesting boxes for possums will provide shelter for our local species. Having a clean, safe water source will also help your backyard ecosystem to thrive. After you have improved biodiversity in your backyard, you could try encouraging others to do so as well. At school, we can talk to our principals and explain to them why the issue is important. Fundraising to buy more native plants to grow in schools would encourage biodiversity in larger areas of land in our communities. Consider joining a volunteer organisation where the work you do is rewarded by a better environment to live in. This will also build connections with community and friends. Write to your local council or member of parliament to discuss on how this issue worries you and how it is affecting your community. Improving the biodiversity of our backyards, our communities, and our country is achievable if we all chip in and do our part. Small changes repeated over and over can produce big results, which will go on to create and support a biodiverse local ecosystem. Change can start with us, with you, and hopefully I have inspired you to do so. Thank you.
Well, Phoebe, thank you. You just carried the baton from what Amber was talking about in terms of active approaches to the challenges through the active understanding of biodiversity and what that means. What you said about start championing and sharing space. Oh, was that for me? Sorry, they were trying on my phone, so they've just run yours. Championing sharing space rather than developing space, and that whole understanding of fragmentation. You really put it beautifully, and then finishing with that idea of who, how, and what you can do is exactly tied in with what Amber was talking about in getting active and driving activism. So thank you for a wonderful presentation. So I think that somehow takes us to our last speaker, who is Josh. Welcome, Josh.
G'day, I'm Josh Askew and I'm currently completing Year 11 at Kiama High School. I've lived in Gerringong all my life and have always had a passion for the outdoors, especially the bush, through activities such as camping and bushwalking. I believe that all our unique species of flora and fauna need our best efforts of protecting them from factors such as disease, feral species, and most importantly, habitat loss, in both our local government area and across the wider country. My key interests in the topic are bush regeneration and conservation, as I believe they are our best tool in preserving Australian species and fighting against climate change. As the climate is becoming a bigger issue among Australian politics and is of national interest, it is vital that we undergo the massive task of reverting much of our unproductive, cleared land back to the natural cycle that they were once a part of. Through doing this, Australia could become a leader in the race to save the planet, with the abundance of land our continent holds being paramount to the opportunities that lay ahead through conservation. I'm currently personally undergoing a couple of regeneration projects myself, slowly converting 2 weed-ridden areas from invasive monocultures into biodiverse native habitats. I have made sure to plant only local native plants in these areas as to allow for our local species to interact with this vegetation as they naturally would in the old growth mature bushland. I plan to care for these zones until they are able to look after themselves, and I'm trying my hardest to eradicate weeds such as the dreaded wandering Jew, which just keeps growing back. Once at a stage where I think the natives are established and not threatened by invasives, I'll leave them to grow and proliferate by themselves. On a wider scale, I'd love to see a future where our local area has much more native bushland than we do presently, as most people here do not live within walking distance of a national park or conservation area, in contrast to much of the Shoalhaven region, where many of its townships are completely surrounded by either national park or state forest. I would love to see our region have at least a few bushland areas close enough to each township for residents to walk or mountain bike through. And these areas not only bring benefits to the natural environment, but for our own health and well-being too. This will also allow for habitats along the south coast to expand further northwards, allowing for many threatened species to have a better chance of spreading and reproducing. With 685 national parks across the country, Australia leads the world with the largest number of these conservation areas. However, in contrast to such a high number, these parks take up an incredibly small percentage of the continent. Therefore, I believe that this should not be where we stop. In my future, I'd love to see Australia as the nation of national parks. Our national anthem says that we have boundless plains to share, so why shouldn't we share them with our native species? Our country is known worldwide for its unique plants and animals, so we should capitalise on that, allowing for farmland that's going to waste, weed-ridden and degraded, to turn into a tourism hotspot with outdoor activities at its heart, aiding in rebuilding the economy following the pandemic. It is my belief that only good can come from widespread planting of native plants, allowing for nature to return to much of Australia, especially our region, and bringing a much needed boost to the rural economy in doing so. Thank you.
It's interesting, Josh, when someone shares a vision, it can do one of two things. It can intimidate or it can inspire. And sometimes when it intimidates, it can give back a kind of mixed feedback. But you stood up really calmly and confidently and not only talked about your vision, but then backed it up with facts and figures. And you also dived into the evocative side as well. A nation of national parks is a very powerful statement. And that would tie in directly with what you talked about earlier, Tessa, about learning from the past, having people on country looking after the land, and boundless plains to share, regardless of whether you're a Republican or a monarchist. The reality is there is boundless space, but it's how we manage it into the future. And then that ties back to what I think you said, Phoebe, about funding and stepping up and asking, and, well, demanding that investment is directed through the eyes of the generation that needs that investment. So that's the scene setter. Is there anything, before we go any further, that either of any of you would like to just make a brief comment about what you heard from the other speakers?
I think it's really amazing to see people, which is learning most, being so engaged with the environment and so knowledgeable and so passionate. It's something that even when I was your age in primary school and in high school, I wasn't as engaged with, and the people around me weren't. So I think it's really inspiring to see that.
Amber, you're talking and the research that you've done and the knowledge you shared about cultural burning really reflected that at that level in history there was no fear of fire.
Yeah, well, Aboriginals, as everyone knows, would hunt for food from the animals, and cultural burning really allows plants to grow for the animals to feed on and shelter and live in that habitat, which, I'm not too sure.
No, that's all right. Did looking further into this change your perspective and thoughts around fire?
Yes, definitely. I didn't know too much about cultural burning, and I'm really inspired by it now. And I think it'd be great to introduce programs for like younger kids and stuff so that they can learn about this. And I feel like cultural burning can really make an impact in native species. Yeah.
Thank you. Tessa, you talked about your school forest and how that kind of was almost like your light bulb moment into this. Can you sort of explain a little bit more about that and what that meant as a young student to have that in your school and have all those species of plants as a forest around you?
Our school has a forest, and like all the little kids, they love to go to the forest and play there. And they've made like their little bases, and like I said in my speech, the training system uses berries and rocks, so people can get things like logs to sit on, and it just makes an environment where kids can learn in nature rather than in the classroom talking about it. They can actually be in it and learn from what they're seeing and doing rather than what they're hearing.
Maybe you feel like the outdoor classroom is the way forward.
Yeah.
What does it mean to sort of have a garden, well, not just a garden, but to be out in nature and to sort of put together all this? I mean, you spoke so eloquently about starting where we are, about championing the sharing rather than, developing. I mean, and biodiversity. How do you see the being outside has influenced your understanding of all of this?
Well, being outside, it lets you connect to nature and sort of see how really important it is and how beautiful nature is and why it should be conserved.
Because you talked about the connections and rebuilding the connections. What do you think's needed to sort of help that happen? Like, what can you see as, if I could say, well, what do you want? What do you need?
Well, we need everyone to just start off small, and even if we all just went home and planted one native plant in our garden, you multiply that by all of the people here, it would make a big difference.
And does that thought comfort you? Yeah, because you put it very concisely, and I think ultimately that's how change happens. And and I really love the way that you articulated that. Alita, you sort of talked about invasive species. How did you find that as a topic that really caught your attention, because you dived into it so deeply?
Well, I think that invasive species is something that not many people really think about as much as issues like habitat loss and climate change, but it's just as bad, because the big picture is for invasive species is that they are harming the native species, which in turn that also affects the native fauna species, like just all the incredible native animals that we have in Australia. They rely on the native flora that invasive species are killing off. So I think it's just really important that we think about invasive species a bit more, because they're just a really big problem.
And Josh, bush regen conservation, Intrepid Landcare is certainly active down here in the local area. What attracted you in terms of looking at the big picture to bushcare and landcare and regeneration?
I think it's because I've always gone camping, being out in the bush and seeing how vast it could be, like going down the south in the Shoalhaven where all the towns are completely surrounded by bush, and then to come home and we're not. Like, the closest I can go is 7 Mile, which that is still a few k's away, so it's not within walking distance, but yeah, just being able to one day have the entire coast flanked by bushland would be great.
Wow, you can see clearly from all of our speakers their capacity, but their honesty, that they do have concerns, they do see the big picture, but at the same time they had the courage to come up here today, not only share their vulnerabilities, but to step up and say, well, this is the vision that I have. This is what I've learned through my camping. This is my passion around the medicinal aspect of plants, which then gives them the chance to dive into a canister and say, well, this is how I can deal with the bigger picture by, as you said, doing that small bit, planting one plant, understanding one medicinal plant, understanding invasive species, acting through a local group, doing a conservation and what's your degree? Conservation biology, and then layering your knowledge and understanding. It's just wonderful to hear and see your outlook, but also feel how grounded you are, even amidst disturbing times on these topics. So on that note, do we have any questions from... Oh, yes.
My questions are Gail. Can you hear me?
Yep.
My question's to Josh. You're weeding and conserving 2 areas yourself. I just wondered how many of your peers, your mates, your school students around you would be prepared to do that with you? How much, in a percentage, of your peers think like you do?
I'd say probably about half have the same values, probably. Don't know if they'd all actively go out and do it themselves, But like, yeah, they're all supportive and they all agree that it's the right thing to do.
It's a case of, how can we help? Because we've obviously all got local knowledge of the plants in our areas, and for things like the Landcare operations, often, I know up there we get called upon to help with the selection of plants because we know our local Indigenous plants. However, our groups, especially the native plant groups, we're getting a little older, and I've certainly got the experience where I was one of the youngest when I joined 30 years ago, and I'm still one of the youngest now, which is a little concerning. So how do we move forward, and how do we help you with all the knowledge that we've learned and the propagation facilities that most of our groups have, which can help yours?
Well, like I said before, we can all just do small things to help, even if it's composting or planting native plants or putting birdhouses in your garden for native birds. And if we all just do a little bit, then it'll add up to the bigger bit.
Yeah. So the question, I'll rephrase that question a little bit. What can these people here do for you in terms of their skills and how they could support and be a part of your ideas and vision? If you could hit up any of these people, what would you say to them? I realise that's an open question and anyone can have a go at it. Do you want to have a go, Amber?
Well, I've recently had a tree planting program at my school, which a lot of the kids really enjoyed, which a lot of people could help with. It's pretty simple to plant a tree, and yeah, we had a lot of fun down at my group, had a lot of fun down at Shoalhaven National Park planting more trees. And yeah, as I said, it's really easy to do, and I think you guys could all help younger generation, let them know how easy it is to do that and how much it could make an impact.
Also in that, I think that even just talking to a younger person about it, start a conversation. If everyone in this room talked to one or two people, that's a lot of younger kids learning about it, and it's important. Like I said in my speech, knowledge is one of the best gifts you can give, and I think giving the younger generations that knowledge will be helpful.
Thanks, Tessa. Mike?
Yeah, no, I'd like to echo that. Talk to the young people in their life, teach them. I know I learned a lot about the environment from my grandfather. It was invaluable to me. And also get in touch with your local sort of young people who do Bushcare, whether that's through Intrepid Landcare or another group. And if you could, donate knowledge, or if you work at a nursery or something like that, you could help them get contacts for those sorts of things. I think that would be really valuable as well.
An interesting two-way street is this, that you have skills perhaps in propagation or knowledge, turning up, sharing that knowledge, offering propagation skills, even if physically you can't do the work, being there to create the conversation, make tea, baking is very important, because that's how Ferny Creek up in Newcastle with the team up there, they grew from 30 to this massive group, because now everyone wants to be there for the social side, and the social side is the interaction, and the work gets done a lot quicker And they get done now, 6 months of work, in 2 visits because they've got so many people. Not that they're doing it faster, they're not rushing it, but there's just more people able to work a bigger front and so on. So, you know, that, and then equally this way, what you girls and guys, what you as a group can offer in terms of these groups. What Gabby offered was the social side, the social media side. She brought 400 people to the group because she put it out there to a whole new audience. She took photos, she shared images, she activated it to places where a lot of these people may not be active. So that the synergies between the two are really exciting.
There's a question over here.
Not so much a question. My name is Karen from Solomon Group, but I just feel that I was born 2 generations too early. Because I wish to me, in primary school in the 60s and going into high school in the 70s, that, and whilst our grandfather was a gardener, and I followed him around the garden as a child, my parents were not gardeners, so that I didn't get my green thumb from them, but I just wish that I could be a bit different. I could have taken a different career path, what I did, and I'm in there now, but not that's a career for me, but it's certainly a great hobby and passion for me. I go out into the garden and say I'll be back in 5 minutes and it's dinner time. So I think this is really inspirational, and I've had these opportunities already brought to our attention. But I think it also points out that the differences in the attitude towards climate to someone born in the late 50s to now, and the change in such a short period of time is a concern. But it's also it's heartwarming to think that a lot of the next generation is taking a different attitude, and I'm sure they'll make the change. Thank you. I also look forward to seeing next time I head down the coast in a few years all your face on placards in the front yards for the next election.
And on that topic, let's not underestimate the fact that it was the actions of students that did strike and go against the adults that said you should be at school. Like, you know, each and every one of you that did that, not just here in the Illawarra, but across the country, that raised that awareness and it put it even higher up the priority list. So, you know, we can't
Time for one more question. Tanya?
Hi, my name's Tanya, and a few years ago there was a demonstration in town, and I rang all my friends, said, come on, let's go, and not one of them joined me. And as I left, I had to really sort myself out because I was so disappointed. Then I worked out that my beliefs and passions informed the way I thought and then informed my emotion. And I had to get over that and realise that my friends had other passions. So I got on the train, I turned up in the city, and I crossed the road, and there were all these students that I knew, and I was not alone for the whole day. So have you had moments when you felt alone, and how did you get through and feel good again?
Well, I think when you have beliefs that you are asking your friends, do you believe this too? And they're like, oh, sorry, I have other things that, well, just know that there are always other people in the world. There's like a population of more than 7 billion people. So of course someone's going to have the same beliefs as you. They're going to do something the same as you. And just know that you're not always alone because, as I said, there's a very large population. And yeah, people will always want to support you. Yeah.
Tessa?
Well,
my experience isn't really related to plants because this is a new thing for me. But I debate a lot, and so sometimes in debating you can feel alone, like you get up to speak by yourself. But then when you come sit back down, you realise that there's a team of other 3 people behind you and that you're not alone in there helping you and supporting you.
Yeah, I think that many people at school have other opinions than you. Like, the popular boys would come up to you and be like, oh, you're the greenie, aren't you? You're the wee one who likes to garden with your mum, aren't you? And you're like, yeah, I am. Yeah.
Where are we? Josh?
I guess it's sort of, even though like we may be the ones that are taking action and doing regeneration or whatever, just finding that other people, even though they're not doing it, still feel the same way and have the same attitudes towards the planet. And yeah, even though they're not doing anything about it, they still happy and support that you're doing as well.
I think it's just sort of a matter of putting yourself out there, and because if you don't really talk about it, you're not going to find anyone who agrees with you.
Yeah, let's bring it back to Landcare again. With Intrepid over the last year, I've done about a dozen events, and in each one we get different people from all age ranges as well. It's really wonderful every time to see people that have a similar set of values to you and that care about the same issues. And that, yeah, whenever I sort of feel a little bit of despair about the state of the environment, I sort of turn to that and think about how many people are, in this fight together. Sort of thing.
Yep.
Wow. Wow. I think it's almost time for tea. I think it is definitely time to gather outside and really absorb what we've just been fortunate enough to be a part of. It's an absolute pleasure to also. Can the TAFE students who are here sort of put their hands up? And all the other students who are here, can you just give me a wave? Really, this has been I will remember this as a vanguard moment, as a turning point to say, well, what a wonderful inclusive future the society is framing through inclusiveness. And if each and every one of you bring one person next year with you, the numbers will swell and the knowledge base will reach further. So to each and every one of you, Amber, Michael, Tess, Alita, Phoebe and Josh, thank you for your honesty and for being a part of a really special panel. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this presentation, then please subscribe to our channel. Other presentations from the conference are available in this playlist, with new ones being added all the time.